All right, welcome into another edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com Indiana basketball postgame wrap-up show. John Alden with you from In Touch with Indiana Sports, and of course, basketball recruiting analyst Kyler Staley with you as always. Indiana suffers another heart-wrenching loss, unfortunately, 72-68 at the hands of visiting UCLA. A game that, very competitive throughout. We'll get into specifics here in just a few minutes, but Kyler, what are kind of your opening impressions on what went down at Assembly Hall this evening?
Yeah, I thought for the most part it followed kind of similar script that we've been kind of seeing from Indiana. I will say they started off the game pretty well. That first stretch or whatever, it was a battle, and then UCLA, being the really, really good team that they are, kind of opened up that lead a little bit. I think at most it got up to like 12 or something like that around there, and Indiana was just constantly throughout the second half biting out of a hole. And I feel like we've seen that way too often for Indiana, where the team that they're playing will set the tone, and Indiana's trying to match that tone or try to figure out things. But second half, Indiana played really good basketball. There were times where they get on a run, and UCLA, they are a really, really good team. They're a well balanced team. They're coached really well. Mick Cronin does a good job with them, but they just had an answer for everything. And Indiana, you were hoping you would get some stops here and there, but they just didn't get the stops when they needed to. And, they got kind of a lucky break, coming down the stretch where it was in the final, like minute 18, had chances to win the game, and Mackenzie Mbako misses that layup and that putback, I should say, and then misses that three at the end. It's tough, man, because Indiana did a really good job of getting themselves back into the game, and they just couldn't finish.
Yeah, and I want to go back to that second half real quick. We were talking about how UCLA was just really good at responding. Pretty much for the entirety of the final 20 minutes, Indiana began being down 10. They'd get it to 5. Then it'd go back up to 10 or so. Then they'd get it back down to 5 or 6. It felt like there was this call and response between Indiana and UCLA, and credit to the Bruins, because we've seen, of course, several teams come into Assembly Hall this year and get wins. But to kind of just be as poised and in control of the game for really the entire 40 minutes and be able to do what they want to do, even when their backs were kind of against the wall, it definitely shows how good UCLA has been this season. Yeah, they've struggled in some road environments. Of course, they had a loss at Illinois before they visited Bloomington here tonight, but hats off to, and I'm not really been a big complimentary person of Mick Cronin, but he had the perfect game plan tonight against Indiana, I feel like.
Yeah, no, they're, like I said, they're a really, really balanced team, and they have a lot of. Their guards. I would put their guards up into the top 5 backcourt in the Big Ten. They do a really good job of forcing the turnovers. Do a really, really good job. And for Indiana, I'm trying to look at see what the stats are. Indiana only had 8 turnovers, which they did a pretty good job with them. It was just really, it just came to defensive assignments, and it felt like Indiana didn't really know what to do on the defensive end, it's kind of a shocker because it's been like that for a lot of the season. But as far as, what scheme they were going to run, a few times you see them in a zone, a lot of times you see them in man, and they just couldn't figure out what formula worked or whatnot. But they threw a lot at UCLA. It just came down to the perimeter guys for UCLA, their guards, their bigs were decent tonight, nothing too crazy. I thought Malik and Ballo did an okay job with them, but it really just came down to their guards. And I think when you look at a team like UCLA, I think they are a team that's built to go on a deep NCAA tournament run because they got the guards factor, they got the wings factor. That's something that you would have hoped Indiana would have had for the most part of the season. They just didn't have it, and UCLA has that. So when you're playing a really good team like that, even though you're at your home floor, you go on runs or whatever and stuff, good teams will find ways to win ball games, and that's exactly what UCLA did tonight.
One thing, too, I felt like for the most part, Indiana has been playing looser ever since things have been, we know what the future is going to be when it comes to moving forward from Mike Woodson. And I feel like for the most part, you saw a lot of that continue into tonight's game, even when they were down throughout most of the second half. The one thing, though, when things got into the nitty gritty, we kind of seen what we've gotten used to seeing with Indiana down the stretch. And that's, I put it on Twitter, clench butt cheeks. And I don't mean that's meant to be more tongue in cheek than it is serious, but they just get really tight. They don't look as confident whenever they're going for their shots. And I think a prime example is just Mackenzie Mbako missing that putback that you mentioned earlier. That's something that whenever the pressure's not on, you're not thinking about it. You just do what you're supposed to do and it goes in. Indiana hasn't been able to find ways to win the close game like that more often than not this season.
No, I mean, honestly, I can't think of one scenario where they were clutch this season, really, other than I would say the Michigan State game. But, I mean, they were just they played good basketball throughout that whole game, basically. But I will agree with you ever since, obviously the news of Mike Woodson stepping down, retiring, whatever you want to call it. I think he's let this team play a little bit more and let them kind of do their thing a little bit more on the floor. And he's tinkering with some lineups to help them get in better starts. I mean, I really do like, and I really hope he sticks with these next 5 games at least, that starting group. I think that's the group that's going to help you get a good start in the game. And then you got Miles Rice and Malik Renew, guys that have started for most of the season coming off the bench. And hopefully that gets them kind of in the game. But it's just I don't want to say they didn't execute tonight, right? But like at the same time, it's like they had good opportunities and they did get a little tight. That putback layup by Mbako, he was just a tad strong on that one. But I felt like they ran a really, really good play. Give that ball to Malik Renew, let him carve out space and just dish it off to Mackenzie Mbako. He wouldn't have gotten a better look anywhere else with that play. So I do feel bad for Mbako because there's been a few times this season where he's been asked to be that clutch guy and he just hasn't been able to get one down. So to me, he's probably due. He's probably due for a clutch shot. Where that's going to come for the rest of the season, I don't know. But for the most part, I do think Mike Woodson is letting them play a little bit looser tonight because you just kind of have that mindset. We've got nothing to lose, and we're just going to put everything out there, and we're going to compete. I said it before when the news first came out with Mike Woodson. This team could either fold it and just give up on the rest of the season, or they could just kind of rally behind and hopefully send Mike Woodson out on a good note. They haven't really done that yet, but they're still competing and they're still fighting and they're trying their hardest at the end of the day.
I also mentioned that, in my opinion, this was a loss that kind of moves them further away from realistic chances of finding a way, or at least finding a path to the NCAA tournament. Yeah, they could win their last 5 games and finish with a 20-11 record. And what would that put you? 11-9 in the Big Ten. That would probably squarely put you on the bubble to where if you want a game in the Big Ten tournament, you might be on the inside looking out at that point. But realistically, I would say at this point in time, NCAA tournament is far from, I don't want to say far from reach, but it's a lot further than you would want it to be at this point in the season.
Can I respectfully disagree with you on this, John?
Sure, yeah, you can absolutely disagree with me. Convince me otherwise.
I totally understand the point and everything, and maybe this is just me being a little bit more optimistic for this Indiana team. But if you look at it, so obviously this loss does hurt, right? It would have been big, but at the end of the day, it's not going to affect your net rating because you lost to a team just by 4 points, I think, or whatever. It's not going to hurt it too much. Indiana's going to be right where they've been for most of the season, right in that 59 to 60 something range or whatever. You got Purdue coming in a few weeks. If you're able to beat Purdue, who out of the Big Ten has the highest net rating, that's going to put you up probably in the lower 50s, I would say, depending on how you win or whatever and stuff. Then you got Penn State, take care of business there. And then you look at the 2 road games out west. You got to split those. And by splitting those,
I think you have to get both of them, though. Maybe that's because one of them's losing to Washington for one. That eliminates you. Well, Washington's not good. And even beating them, I guess maybe the fact that it's a road environment could help, but that's not going to do anything to boost your resume, I wouldn't think.
Well, what I was going to get at is at least you have to split them. And if you're going to split, you better be beating Washington. And if you lose to Oregon but you beat Washington, you're just kind of like, flatlined at that point. It doesn't really hurt you, doesn't really help you or not. It does look at, you went on the road, out west to beat a West Coast team. So, and then if you beat Ohio State, those are good wins, right? And you put that together, you probably do have to go into the Big Ten tournament and win a game probably to get on the right side. But here's the advantage for Indiana. And that bubble group or whatever right now, the teams that are fighting for the bubbles, it's really weak. And Indiana, out of the remaining teams, still with only 5 games remaining in the regular season, has the best opportunity to get on the right side of the bubble out of any team across the country. North Carolina, for example, you look at them, they're probably in a similar boat for Indiana this season to storied programs that are struggling this year. North Carolina's schedule, they still got quad 3 and quad 4 games to play that aren't going to help them at all to even make the NCAA tournament. Indiana's still got about, I would say, at least 3 quad 1 games still left to play. So I'm not ready to say that they're completely dead out of the NCAA tournament just because of what's coming up. I will say if they do lose to Purdue, that the opportunities really, really get slim there, and you probably got to do some damage in the Big Ten tournament as well as win the rest of your regular season games. But it's not dead yet. It's not good yet, but it's not dead yet, in my opinion.
I mean, and again, just like the last time Indiana faced Purdue, of course, that'll be their next game. It'll be several days from now. But if you are able to get that, it could be a springboard into your final 4 games of the season in terms of regaining some momentum. We talked about how this team's playing loose. Mike Woodson has had a knack previously for beating Purdue. It's been a bit, but you know he would want to go out on a good note, defeating his arch rival. And I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I do think that this team will be prepared whenever the Boilermakers come to town next Sunday.
Look, if they would have gotten blown out by Purdue a few weeks ago at Mackey, I have a totally different feeling about this game.
Yeah.
But they played well enough to almost beat Purdue at Mackey. They didn't have to play as well as they did. They showed up this game. I think for what we saw the UCLA game tonight, they didn't win, obviously, but they competed. And I think that brings a little bit hope to this team, to the fan base at least, for them to show out. I think Assembly Hall is going to be rocking when Purdue comes into town. It's going to be a big-time atmosphere, a big-time college showdown. Mike Woodson's looking to end his, coaching career at Indiana at 500 versus Purdue, which is crazy to think. So it's going to be a big game. I think Indiana, it's a do-or-die type of game for the NCAA tournament hopes. Yeah. They need to really come out and win, and they just need to, like I kind of mentioned earlier, they got to learn how to set the tone. If they can set the tone early at the Purdue game and make them play their game, it's a totally different ball game. But we have yet to really see that from Indiana this year. But there's still 5 games left, and you can see what can change.
We'll go ahead and wrap this one up tonight. Indiana, unfortunately, loses to UCLA 72-68 at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall. As we mentioned, they'll be back in action. 9 days from now? No, on Sunday, the 23rd, Purdue will be back at Assembly Hall. It will be the first of the final 5 games for Indiana's regular season before unless things go completely south, they'll be in the Big Ten tournament come a few weeks. So, of course, we'll keep an eye on where they end up going with all of that. So for myself, for Kyler Staley, this has been another edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com Indiana basketball postgame wrap-up show. We'll talk to you next time.